The alien girl in the alley. Kai walked through the cold alleys of Sector 9. The rain was falling softly over metal roofs, and the air smelled like smoke and oil. He just wanted to fix his ship and leave this dirty trade world behind, but something pulled him to take the long way back to his hangar. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was just bad luck. But as he passed a broken dumpster, he heard a sound that made him stop. It was not a machine, not a rat, not wind. It was a soft cry, like someone trying not to be heard. He turned slowly, his boots splashing in a shallow puddle, and there she was, half hidden behind trash, a girl not human. Her skin was pale, silver, her eyes large and glowing purple, and her body curled up as if she had been beaten or abandoned. Her clothes were torn, her long hair wet and stuck to her face. She looked up at him and tried to speak, but her lips trembled instead. She reached out her hand weakly and whispered in a broken voice, "Please, I'll bear your offspring. Just don't leave me like the others." Kai stared at her, stunned. His brain took a second to process the words. Was this some kind of trap? Was she a runaway, or worse, one of those exotic slaves sold by the darker houses of the galaxy? But she didn't look like bait. She looked scared and hurt and desperate. She tried to sit up, but fell back, coughing, her hands clutching her stomach. And then he saw the bruises, the burn marks, the raw skin on her wrists, where bindings had been. He knelt slowly and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Her eyes followed his every move, like a frightened animal. Her voice came again, weaker. "This time they said he would stay. They said I was special. They lied." Kai had seen enough pain in his life to know real hurt. When he saw it, this girl had not just been used, she had been broken. He took off his coat and gently placed it over her small, shivering frame. She flinched at first, but then clutched it tightly. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "Someone will find you again." She looked at him confused, as if she didn't believe what she was hearing. He offered his hand, and for a long moment, she did not move. Then slowly she reached out and let him help her up. She could barely walk, so he picked her up. Her body was light to light. She had not eaten in days. Her head rested on his shoulder, and he felt her whisper "thank you" over and over again, like she was afraid he would vanish if she stopped. Taz. He walked through the rain, carrying her toward his ship. He heard footsteps behind him, fast, heavy boots. He looked back, but saw nothing. Just shadows moving in the mist, but he knew someone was watching, someone who wanted her back. He quickened his pace and reached the hangar, locking the doors behind him. He laid her gently on the cot inside his ship and wrapped her in a blanket. She fell asleep almost instantly, but her hands still gripped his coat like a lifeline. Kai sat nearby watching the monitors. Someone had placed a bounty recently, not on him, but on a silver-skinned female, unknown species. Extremely rare, bring alive, high reward. His jaw tightened. He didn't know what mess he had stepped into, but he knew one thing. She was not going back to whoever broke her. The galaxy was full of monsters. But maybe, just maybe, tonight she found someone who wasn't one of them. He looked at her sleeping face, her chest rising slowly, her fingers still shaking in fear. He didn't even know her name yet, but her words still echoed in his head. "Please don't leave me like the others." And for the first time in a long while, Kai felt something strange inside his heart. Not pity, not duty, but something warmer, something dangerous, something like hope, a broken pact, and a secret species. The next morning, Kai sat beside the bunk, watching her sleep. The ship was silent, except for the hum of its power core. Her face looked calm now, but her body still trembled sometimes, like it remembered pain even in dreams. She finally woke, slowly blinking at the ceiling. Before turning her eyes toward him, her voice came out soft and uncertain. "Are you still here?" Kai nodded. "I said I would help you, and I meant it." She looked away as if she didn't believe him. "What's your name?" he asked. After a moment she hesitated, then whispered, "Varel." Her voice was musical, but hollow, as if even her name had become a burden. She tried to sit up and Kai helped her. He offered her a warm nutrient pack. She ate slowly, almost like she expected him to snatch it away any second. He watched her carefully and asked, "Why were they after you? What did they do to you?" She stayed quiet at first, her eyes filled with shadows of memories. She didn't want to remember, but slowly she began to speak. "Him. The last of my kind, or maybe one of the last. My people used to live on a world called Several Prime, but war and greed broke us. We had something rare in our blood. A gene that allows powerful energy bonds when we mate, not just physical but mental, emotional. My people called it the soul seal. It only happens once in a lifetime, and only with one true match for each of us. We don't choose it, the bond chooses." She paused, her fingers tightening around the empty food pouch. "And when it chooses, we can't break it." Kai listened. Without speaking, Varel's voice cracked. "I bonded. Once it chose someone I trusted. I thought he loved me, but he only wanted the bond's power once it was complete. He sold me to the guild. They tried to replicate it, force it, use me again and again. But it never worked. The bond was gone, broken now. They want my child because they think it will carry the same power. But the truth is, if I bond again, it might kill me, or worse, it might never happen again. She turned her face away as tears rolled down her cheeks. Guy sat quietly, his hands clenched. The idea that someone could use another person like that for some twisted science or money made his blood boil. He looked at Varel. She seemed so fragile, and yet something deep inside her refused to give up. She had run, survived, escaped, all while half-starved, and hunted. He stood up and walked to the monitor, checking for signals. A red alert flashed. A new bounty had just been posted. Female civilian, hybrid, unclaimed reward triple previous offer. Kai cursed under his breath. They had tracked her to this planet. We have to move, he said, turning back to her, but she looked weak. Too weak. Her body was starting to show signs of transformation, faint lines of glowing silver along her arms and neck. Kai asked, "What's happening to you?" She looked down slowly. The bond, it's waking again. "It's near you," she said, barely above a whisper. Her eyes filled with something like fear and something like wonder. "I don't know why. I don't even know you, but my body, it remembers your scent, your touch, like it's push. Choosing you." Kai froze. The air around them felt thick, like something invisible had changed between them. He didn't understand it fully, but he knew this wasn't a trick. Wasn't lying. Her kind didn't fake this kind of reaction, and she looked just as scared of it as he was. He stepped back, shaking his head. "Wait. I'm just a mechanic, not some chosen one. I fix broken ships, not hearts or alien destinies." But reached out and touched his hand, her fingers cold and shaking, and said softly, "Maybe you fix more than you know." Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship, motion detected near the outer wall. Kai rushed to the control panel and saw shadows, moving figures in dark armor. The guild was here already, maybe 10, maybe more. He couldn't fight them all, not directly, but he had to protect her. He turned and said, "Get ready. We're leaving now." "Where to?" she asked. "Anywhere they can't find us." He opened the floor panel and pulled out 2 breathing masks and a cloak. The sewer tunnels under the city were old, but still functional, and no scanners worked. Down there, he helped Varel up and wrapped her in the cloak, her body glowing faintly under it. They slipped out through the hidden exit as the enemy breached the hangar above. Kai didn't look back. He held her close and moved fast through dark, wet tunnels, the sound of water echoing around them. Varel whispered, "Thank you again," her voice weaker. Now he held her tighter and said, "Don't thank me. Yet we're not safe, but I promise. I won't leave you, not now, not ever, no matter what your bond says or doesn't say. I'm not one of them." And in that moment, deep below a city full of liars and bounty hunters, a small broken alien girl felt something new, not the pull of biology or the magic of her kind, but something stronger, something human and real and maybe, just maybe, worth fighting for. Escaped through the slum stars, the sewer tunnels led them far from the hangars, into the underbelly of the city, a place where light barely reached and laws no longer applied. Kai carried Varel most of the way, her breathing shallow, her glow fading. She was burning up from the inside her body, reacting to something ancient and powerful. Her fingers clutched his jacket, as if she was afraid to let go. They finally emerged into the dark alleys of slum sector, for a place forgotten by most and feared by all, where junk floated in the air, and the stars were blocked by towers of rust. Kai knew this place. He used to do shady repair jobs here. When he had no license, no papers, and no future people here didn't ask questions. They only watched from the shadows. Had moved on. Varel couldn't walk far, so he took her to an old workshop he once used. It was falling apart, but hidden behind a fake wall, and protected by an outdated defense system, still functional enough to scare away the hunters. He laid her down on a soft pile of old fabrics, and searched the cabinets for anything useful. Her skin was flickering now, not just glowing, but shifting like ripples of silver light. Under the surface he found an old med injector, and pressed it into her arm. She winced, but said nothing. Kai sat beside her, watching helplessly. "What's happening to you?" he asked again. She opened her eyes slowly and said, "It's the bond. It's forcing my body to prepare like it thinks I've already chosen you. It's not supposed to happen this fast, but I can't control it." He didn't understand her species, didn't understand how bonding worked, but he understood fear and pain, and the look in her eyes was both. She tried to sit up, but her hands were shaking, so he held her steady. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly, and for a moment she closed her eyes, as if those words were the only thing keeping her together. Then her eyes shot open, and her ears twitched. "Someone's here," she whispered. Kai checked the scanner, an old one, but still working. 2 signals nearby, not moving, watching. He peeked through the crack in the wall, and saw them, figures in cloaks. Pale eyes, watching from the shadows, then slowly walking away. He recognized the marks on their coats, guild scouts. They were tracking by scent, or energy, or both. They had no idea where he was yet, but they were getting closer. "We can't stay," he whispered, but Varel grabbed his hand. "Not yet, I'm changing. If we run now, I'll collapse before we reach the edge." Her voice was strained, and her skin now glowed in waves with every breath. Kai paced the floor, thinking they needed cover, and a distraction. He had an idea. Risky, but it might work. He pulled out an old scent scrambler, and tossed it outside, then ignited the old power core on a nearby droid, and sent it walking down the opposite alley. It exploded minutes later in a flash of smoke, and sparks drawing the scouts away, while they slipped out through the back view. Clung to him, her strength fading again, but her eyes sharp, always watching. They moved through tight alleys and over broken bridges, until they reached the shuttle graveyard, hundreds of old ships rusting in silence. A maze of scrap and memories. Kai found one he used before, a small scout vessel, still functional if barely he carried. Varel inside and locked the doors. She lay on the cot, breathing hard, her skin pulsing. Brighter now, like something inside her was waking, something dangerous. He held her hand and asked, "Are you sure it's me the bond is reacting to?" She looked at him, not with fear this time, but something else, something like surrender. "Maybe I never had a choice. Maybe it was always meant to be, or maybe I'm just too broken to fight it anymore. But when I'm near you, I don't feel pain, only heat and light, and this strange peace I haven't known since before the labs." Before the chains, Kai couldn't answer. He didn't know if he was ready for something like this. But he knew one thing: she needed him, and not just to run or to fight, but to believe her, to stay, and to hold on, even when everything around them wanted to tear her apart. He turned on the engines, and lifted the ship slowly into the dark, polluted sky of Sector. For Varel closed her eyes again, her body glowing like soft stars beneath a storm. And then the ship rocked. Something hit it from below the scanners. Screamed proximity alerts. Something was following them, a small guild tracker drone. Locked onto their trail, Kai cursed and pulled the controls, hard diving between broken towers and dodging burning cables. The drone fired a warning shot, then another. He had no weapons, but he had tricks and speed. He flew low near a gas vent and released a plasma trail behind the ship. The drone followed too close. It exploded in blue fire. As Kai pulled up into orbit, Varel gasped, her body reacting to the G-force, and her hands gripped the edge of the cot. But her voice was calm. "You saved me again." Kai looked at her through the rear mirror, sweat on his brow, breath heavy. "Yeah, but they won't stop coming. You know that." She nodded. "I know." And then she whispered softly, "But they don't understand something important. I'm no longer running alone." In the silence that followed, the stars outside seemed to glow a little brighter, and inside the stolen ship a broken girl and a stubborn human flew together into the unknown, chased by death, bound by fate, and something far stronger than either could explain. The bond ceremony that was never meant. The stars stretched endlessly around them, as Kai's stolen ship slipped into the edge of unmarked space, far from regulated routes and trade lanes. Varel lay on the cot, her silver glow dimmer now, but steadier. She was breathing better, though her skin still shimmered with each heartbeat. Her voice was soft as she asked, "Where are we going?" Kai looked over from the pilot's seat and replied, "Somewhere quiet, somewhere no one scans anymore. I once worked with a trader who mentioned an old planet, abandoned long ago by explorers. It's off-grid. No one cares about it now, and that's exactly why it's perfect." Varel didn't respond at first, then said in a low voice, "I can feel the bond stabilizing. The pain is easing, but that also means it's forming for real this time. I never wanted to force this on anyone, especially not you." Kai leaned back and looked at her. "You didn't force anything. I stayed because I wanted to. Maybe not at first, but now I've seen what they did to you, and I can't walk away from that. I don't know if I believe in destiny or soul bonds or ancient alien magic, but I know you didn't deserve any of it, and you don't have to go through it alone." Her eyes shimmered with something that looked like tears, though they quickly vanished into her glowing skin. When they finally reached the planet, it was a small green world covered in mist and ruins, the remains of a once great civilization, long forgotten by time. Strange towers twisted like trees, reaching for the clouds, and broken statues lay half buried in soft moss. Kai landed the ship near an ancient temple overgrown with vines and silence. The sensors detected no life, only echoes, and Winvile stepped out carefully, still weak, but determined. She walked slowly toward the temple, her body humming with energy that made the air buzz. Kai followed, unsure of what they were doing, but unwilling to leave her side. Inside the temple were carvings on the walls showing beings like her standing beneath glowing stars, holding hands with creatures of many shapes, including humans. The center of the room held a stone platform surrounded by a ring of strange symbols, glowing faintly as Varel approached. "Then this was where my people once came, when the bond chose its sacred," she said, her voice distant. "This is where we completed the ceremony, where both would touch the center, and the bond would seal forever." Kai hesitated, his heart thudding faster. He had fought pirates, repaired ships, outrun bounty hunters, but nothing felt as terrifying as this moment. He looked at her, then at the platform, then back at her. Are you saying we have to finish? Viral nodded slowly. You don't have to. If you leave now, the bond will fade. It will hurt, but I'll survive. But if you touch it with me, it won't just bond us. It will complete what nature started. It will protect us both from the trackers. Their scanners won't recognize us anymore. It will rewrite my energy signature, and yours too will disappear from their tech forever. But once it's done, it cannot be undone. Kai looked down at his hands, calloused from years of work, scarred from tools and fights. He looked at her again, this silver alien girl who had been through hell, and still stood with more strength than most warriors. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing his hand beside hers on the center of the stone. It was cold at first, then blindingly hot, then something else altogether. The light around them flared, the symbols on the floor spinning faster, the air vibrating with ancient energy. And then it all went silent. The stone turned white, the light settled, and Kai felt something shift inside him. Not pain, not pleasure, something deeper, a sense of presence, a feeling that someone else now lived inside the edge of his thoughts, not invading but sharing, as if Rel's heartbeat now echoed with his own. She collapsed into his arms, breathing hard, her body still glowing, but now it was calm, not flickering. Her voice was small but sure. It's done. You didn't run. He held her tightly. No, I didn't, and I won't. Her body leaned into his, and for a long moment, the broken girl who had begged him not to leave now rested in silence, trusting him fully, not because of the bond, but because of the choice he made before it. But outside the temple, an old satellite still orbiting the dead planet blinked once and silently sent a pulse back into the stars. It had seen a flash of light. It had recorded energy patterns, and far away, deep in guilt space, a machine received the signal and beeped. New data logged severally and bonding flare. Detected location confirmed, and once again, the hunt began back on the planet, unaware of what had just been set in motion. Kai sat beside the temple wall, watching Varel sleep, her head on his chest, her breathing steady for the first time since he found her. And in the quiet space between broken statues and glowing moss, he let himself close his eyes, not in fear, not in guilt, but in peace, because now he wasn't just running with her, he was running for her, and that made all the difference. The guild leaders demand. The days passed quietly on the ruined planet. The air was clean, the sky dimly blue, and the ruins offered them shelter from the harsh light of distant suns. Virel slowly recovered her energy, stabilizing as the bonds settled inside her. She no longer glowed in panic. Her body was calm, her steps lighter. Kai helped her repair one of the temple's old side rooms, turning it into a small living space with working lights, recycled water, and food from the ship's stock. They began to speak more, not just about the past, but small things. Food. He missed music. She remembered stars. She dreamed about it. Was the closest either of them had felt to peace in a long time. But peace never lasted long, especially in a galaxy ruled by greed and power. One evening, as Kai adjusted an old sensor to scan the orbit above the device, buzzed red, he frowned, checking the signal. Something was approaching fast, too big to be a drone, too direct to be a trader. Before he could act, a pulse shot through the air, a wave of invisible force slammed through the ruins, freezing all tech. The lights died, the generator coughed, and everything fell into silence. Again, Vero stepped beside him, eyes wide. She whispered, "They're here," and before Kai could reach for his sidearm, the ceiling exploded above them, dust and stone raining down as a group of armored figures descended through anti-grav belts, their suits marked with the silver emblem of the guild. At their center walked a tall alien with 4 arms and golden skin, his eyes glowing with synthetic lenses. His voice was like ice when he spoke. "Bring her to me alive. Take the human if needed." Kai tried to fight. He moved fast, striking first, but they were trained and ready. They shocked him with a stun rod and kicked him aside. Pharrell screamed, but she was too weak, her body reacting to their weapons, which disrupted her internal energy. They bound her in energy cuffs and dragged her away, as Kai struggled to stand, blood on his mouth and pain in every bone. When he woke, he was in a dark room, cold chains on his wrists, but alive. Across from him in the shadows stood the guildmaster, the leader who had hunted Virel for years. The alien's voice was calm and cruel, as he said, "You should have walked away, human. You could have lived in peace. Instead, you broke a 1 billion credit bond and helped my property vanish." Kai spat on the floor. "She's not your property, and never was." Guildmaster smiled and pressed a button. A screen flickered on, showing Virel strapped to a lab table, her body glowing faintly, her face calm, but her eyes screaming. She was surrounded by machines, scanning her, measuring her, and preparing for something. Kai shouted, "Let her go." The alien ignored him and said, "This is your choice. Walk away now and we erase your Memory, we give you wealth, safety, a clean record, or stay, and she becomes the center of our next experiment. Her child willpower fleets, her blood will be sold to the highest. Bitter Kai's fists clenched every word, twisting inside his chest. He had no army, no plan, and no weapon, only one thing left, his decision. He looked at the screen at Varel, then back at the guildmaster, and said quietly, then, I guess you'll have to kill me because I'm not leaving her. The guildmaster narrowed his eyes and said, foolish, then you will both be forgotten. He turned away, but Kai smiled through the pain because deep down, he had already started thinking about escaping. The hallway, a cleaning drone rolled by its camera, flickered its body, old and rusted, but still moving, and Kai saw something strange. For just a second, its light blinked in. Morse code, old Earth code, a pattern he once used in trade work. It said, help is near, hold fast, and vanished into the dark. Someone had followed them, someone who wasn't guild, someone who still cared in the lab. Varel lay still, but inside her energy was building her bond with Kai, had unlocked parts of her DNA. No one understood, and the machines around her began to flicker. One by one, lights flashed, screens blinked, and the scientist stepped back. Confused, she closed her eyes, focused on Kai's heartbeat. Even far away, she could feel him, and that was enough. In the holding cell, Kai pulled at his chains, thinking fast. The drone had come from the lower decks, probably the same tunnels used for waste and power conduits. If he could break the wall panel just enough to short the lock, he might have a chance. He waited until the guards rotated, then twisted his wrist painfully to reach the broken nail in his boot, pressing it into the edge of the lock. A spark flew, the light blinked red, then green, the cuff released. He smiled just a little. The guild thought they had. One thought the human was just another tool to be tossed aside, but they had made one mistake. They touched what he cared about, and now there was no more fear, only fire, only purpose. And as Kai slipped into the shadows of the facility, he whispered to himself, I'm coming for you, Varel, and this time no one's stopping me. One man against the lab. The guild facility was deep underground, built into the rocky bones of a forgotten moon, surrounded by darkness, and protected by layers of thick alloy walls, lasers, and scanners. It was a place made to hold rare beings like Varel and crush anyone foolish enough to come after them. But Kai had no plan, no map, only his will and the memory of her voice. He moved through the corridors, silently using every shadow, every flickering light to his advantage, his fingers still bleeding from breaking out of the cuffs, but his eyes sharp, filled with rage and resolve. He passed 2 guards and knocked them out with tools from the maintenance bay. He used a welding torch to seal doors behind him, slowing the pursuit. He remembered the old trade tech he'd worked on years ago, and rewired a power conduit to overload the lights on level 2, causing a blackout that made the entire facility switch to emergency mode. Alarms started to wail, red lights spinning, as guards scrambled to control what they thought was a system failure. But Kai kept moving, his mind clear, with one goal: reach Heron, the central lab. Varel was still strapped to the operating table, her body surrounded by glowing lines of data. The machines were scanning her reproductive system, trying to extract something they didn't understand. Her eyes opened slowly, and she felt a pulse in her chest. Something sharp, something alive. It was Kai. She could feel him close, like a storm getting stronger. The bond between them acting like a beacon. She whispered his name, and the machines picked it up, analyzing her neural response. Guild scientists observed her heart rate, increasing, her energy levels surging, and the lead technician spoke into a comms device. The human is approaching, stop him now. But it was already too late. Kai had reached the inner ring, using a security card stolen from one of the guards, and slipped into the ventilation shaft that led straight above the lab. He moved fast, his body bruised, but his steps silent. As he dropped into the shadows behind the room's observation deck, he saw her from above, pale and glowing slightly, her hands twitching as the machines closed in with sharp tools and syringes. Without thinking, he pulled the old plasma cutter from his belt and cut the glass with a single spark. The window cracked, exploded, and he jumped down, landing between Varel and the scientists, his eyes burning with fury. Don't touch her, he growled, and the guards pulled their weapons. But he was already moving, smashing the nearest console with the cutter, causing a surge of electricity that shorted half the machines. The lights flickered again, and Varel's bonds loosened her body, glowing now with uncontrolled energy, her skin shimmering as the ancient power of the bond fully awakened inside her. She stood slowly, eyes bright, with a kind of fire no one in the room had ever seen before. Her voice was steady, yet filled with warning. Leave us or burn. They didn't listen, and that was their last mistake. Varel raised her hands, and a pulse of pure force blasted outward, throwing machines into walls and knocking guards off their feet. Kai stood beside her, ready to protect her, but now he realized she didn't need saving. Not anymore. They moved together through the lab, destroying control panels, disabling security doors and freeing other rare captives who had been trapped in cages. They didn't stop until the fire suppression systems activated and steam filled the hulls. In the chaos, they made it to the escape bay, where old transport ships were stored. One still had fuel and power, but alarms were blaring and more guild forces were closing in. Kai powered up the ship while Virel sat beside him, breathing hard, her energy still flickering from the overload. "You came," she said quietly. "I told you I would," he replied, and smiled despite the blood on his face. She reached for his hand and held it tight. Not because the bond demanded it, but because she wanted to. The ship lifted into the air. Just as the hangar doors exploded behind them, a squad of fighters launched in pursuit, but Virel closed her eyes and focused the bond between them, acted like a shield, masking their energy signature and confusing the enemy scanners. The fighters turned the wrong way, lost in the debris and shadows, as Kai pushed the engines into full throttle and escaped into the stars. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of space around them, like a heartbeat, had won for now, but they knew the guild would not stop. Yet they had something more powerful than weapons or tech. They had chosen each other freely, not as captor and captive, not as bonded strangers, but as two souls who refused to let go. As they drifted beyond the last beacon of guild-controlled space, Virel leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You set me free." And Kai answered with no hero speech, no perfect words, just a quiet, "I'm glad I found you in that alley." And she smiled for the first time, not with pain, not with fear, but with the truth of being seen and accepted just as she was. And together they flew on toward whatever waited next in the dark. Asterisk, a new world for a new life. They drifted through the stars for weeks, searching for a place no map showed, and no hunter would think to look. A world unclaimed, unmarked, untouched by war or greed. Kai had heard of it once in a bar from a drunk trader who swore there were old planets lost during the early expansion cycles, hidden in static fields, invisible to scanners. He input the coordinates, not knowing if they were real or myth, but they followed them anyway, because they had nothing left but each other. Virel grew stronger with each passing day. Her glow was no longer wild, but soft and steady, her energy stable, her movements graceful, her body adapting to the changes the bond had awakened inside her. Her voice no longer shook when she spoke, and her hands didn't tremble when she reached for him. They had become partners in everything, flying, fixing, surviving, and even smiling, sometimes in the quiet hum of the ship, when the stars outside looked peaceful. Then one day, the static cleared, and the planet appeared, a green-blue world with rivers like veins and forests that pulsed with life. Its orbit was calm, no satellites, no stations, only silence. Kai guided the ship down and landed in a clearing near the edge of a lake. The trees swayed with silver-tipped leaves, and the sky was filled with strange birds that shimmered like glass. They stepped out together, the wind brushing over them like a welcome, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, they felt safe. They built a shelter from the ship parts and local wood, simple but strong, with a view of the lake and the open sky. They worked together day by day, collecting food, crafting tools, mapping the area. Virel taught Kai how to read natural signs using her people's ancient knowledge, and Kai showed her how to build filters, repair systems, and start fires without harming the land. Their bond made everything easier, not because it forced love, but because it created understanding. Even in silence, they felt connected. One morning, Virel stood by the lake, her hands on her stomach, her eyes wide. She called for Kai, and he came running, thinking something was wrong. But when he saw her expression, he stopped. Her voice was quiet, but certain. "It's happening." She said, "It's real." Kai didn't understand at first, then saw her fingers gently pressing over her belly. Her glow was different, softer, warmer. He stepped closer and placed his hand over hers and felt it, a pulse, not hers, not his. Something new, something small and growing. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled. "They tried to use me, they tried to breed me like an animal, but now I choose. Now I create, not for them, not for bloodlines or power, but for us, for something good." Kai didn't speak, he just held her there under the open sky, with wind in their hair and the sound of water lapping against the shore. Seasons passed, the world changed colors, and their home grew. Virel's belly rounded with life, and Kai built new rooms, with soft bedding, and a cradle carved from a tree she had blessed with her touch. The forest watched over them, as if it knew what they had fought through to be here. And every evening they sat by the fire and told each other stories about their old lives, their scars, their dreams, and what they would name the child. One evening, as stars began to rise, Virel leaned against Kai and said softly, "Do you ever wonder why the bond chose you?" He looked at her with a small smile. "Maybe because I'm stubborn, or maybe because I held your hand when you were shaking, or maybe because you smiled at me, even when you thought you were dying." Virel laughed, a sound like music drifting across the quiet land, and then she said maybe it chose us because no one else would understand the pain we carry, but together, we make it something new. Then came the night when the skies lit up with falling stars, and Virel knew the time had come. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she breathed with purpose, and Kai stayed by her side, holding her hand, guiding her through every wave of pain and joy. And when the first cry filled their small home, it wasn't just a sound, it was a victory, a promise, a future. Kai held the small child in his arms, a mix of silver skin and soft human warmth, eyes like starlight hands that gripped his finger with strength he didn't know a newborn could have. Virel watched from the bed, her body tired, but her face glowing. She whispered, "What should we call her?" Kai looked down at the baby, then at her, and said, "Hope, because that's what she gave us." And Virel nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, hope. And so on a world untouched by war, far from the reach of empires and greed, a child was born. Not from fear or chains, but from freedom and love, and under the stars that had watched them flee, fight, and fall, Kai and Virel finally found something worth more than survival. They found peace, and the beginning of a life no one could ever take away.